Every cheater thinks they're smarter than the person waiting at home. They think the silence is ignorance. They think the smile is forgiveness. But sometimes that silence is the sound of a trap snapping shut. Nathan Sterling thought he got away with the perfect night, perfume on his collar and a lie on his lips. But when he turned the key to his front door at 6 a.m., he didn't find a sleeping wife. He found an empty closet, a cold bed, and a stack of papers that would ruin his life before breakfast. He thought he was the player, but he was just the pawn. This is the story of how he lost everything, overnight. The gravel of the driveway crunched under the tires of the Mercedes C-Class, a sound that usually signaled the triumphant return of the man of the house. But this morning, to Nathaniel Nate Sterling, it sounded like an accusation. He killed the engine and sat in the silence for a moment, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes were rimmed with red, the inevitable tax of 3 gin and tonics and 4 hours of sleep at the Hyatt Regency downtown. He rubbed his jaw, feeling the prickle of stubble. He needed to look like he had been pulling an all-nighter at the firm, specifically the Sterling and O'Connell Architectural Group, not pulling the sheets off Isabel Hart in room 412. "Pull it together, Nate," he whispered, his voice raspy. He reached into the glove compartment, grabbing the bottle of Listerine he kept for these exact moments. He swished, spat onto the perfectly manicured lawn, and grabbed his briefcase. He had the lie rehearsed. The zoning permits for the Kensington project were a nightmare. Grant and I were buried in blueprints until 4 a.m. I fell asleep on the office couch. It was a solid lie. Grant O'Connell, his business partner and best friend since college, would cover for him. Grant always covered for him. Nate walked up the steps of the sprawling colonial house in suburban Connecticut. It was a trophy house, the kind that screamed, "We made it." He and Cassidy had bought it 5 years ago, right before things started to drift. He inserted his key into the lock. It didn't turn. Nate frowned, jiggling it. "What the?" He pulled the key out and tried again. Nothing. It was as if the tumblers had seized up. Annoyance flared in his chest, mixing with his hangover. He rang the doorbell, wincing at the loud chime echoing inside. He waited. No footsteps, no barking from Buster, their golden retriever. "Cass!" he called out, banging on the wood. "Cassidy, the lock is jammed!" Silence. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at the back of his neck. Not because he was worried about her safety, that didn't even cross his mind first, but because he felt exposed. Standing on his front porch in yesterday's suit at 6:15 a.m. was not a good look. He walked around the side of the house to the back patio. The sliding glass door was usually locked, but sometimes Cassidy forgot. He tried the handle. Locked. He peered through the glass, shielding his eyes from the rising sun. The kitchen looked wrong. The counters, usually cluttered with the high-end espresso machine, the stand mixer, and the decorative jar of biscotti, were bare. Completely bare. It looked like a model home. What is going on? He found the spare key hidden inside a fake rock near the garden hose. A cliché, he knew, but effective. He scrambled to the back door and jammed the key in. It turned. He slid the door open and stepped into the kitchen. The air was stale, devoid of the usual scent of vanilla and roasted coffee beans that defined his mornings. The silence was heavy, almost physical. Cassidy. His footsteps echoed on the hardwood. He walked into the living room. Gone. The oversized beige sectional where they watched Netflix. Gone. The 75-inch OLED TV. Gone. The antique rug they bought in Morocco. Gone. The room was completely empty, save for a single cheap folding card table set up in the dead center of the room. Nate stood frozen, his briefcase slipping from his fingers, and hitting the floor with a dull thud. His brain couldn't process the visual data. He had left this house at 7:12 p.m. last night. It was fully furnished. He had kissed Cassidy on the cheek, told her he loved her, and walked out. 12 hours. She had done this in 12 hours. He sprinted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Cassidy!" he screamed, his voice cracking. He burst into the master bedroom. It was stripped. No bed, no nightstands. The walk-in closet door was wide open. He ran to it. His side of the closet was untouched. His suits hung in perfect rows. His shoes were racked. Her side was decimated. Not a hanger, not a shoebox, not a bobby pin remained. It was as if she had never existed. He spun around, dizzy, nausea rising in his throat. He ran back downstairs to the living room, to that solitary card table. On the table sat 3 things. 1. His wedding ring, which he had, accidentally, left on the bathroom sink the night before. 2. A manila envelope. 3. A tablet, propped up on a stand. Nate walked toward the table like a man walking to the gallows. He reached for the envelope first. It wasn't sealed. He pulled out the documents. At the top, in bold, uncompromising font, "Petition for dissolution of marriage," and paper-clipped to the front was a sticky note with Cassidy's elegant, loopy handwriting. "Press play." Nate stared at the tablet. It was an older iPad, one he thought they had lost years ago. It was fully charged. His hand trembled as he reached out and tapped the screen. A video file opened. Cassidy's face filled the frame. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was sitting in a car, her car, parked somewhere dark. She looked calm, terrifyingly calm. "Hello, Nathaniel," Video Cassidy said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were cold, hard flint. "If you're watching this, it's morning. You're probably hungover. You probably reek of that cheap lavender perfume Isabel wears. And you're probably wondering where your furniture is." Nate stopped breathing. Isabel, she used her name. "You think you're clever, Nate," Cassidy continued, leaning closer to the camera. "You think because you put your phone on Do Not Disturb and park 2 blocks away from the hotel that I don't see you. But I've seen you for a long time." On the screen, Cassidy held up a stack of photos. She flipped through them slowly. Flip. Nate and Isabel kissing at a bistro 3 weeks ago. Flip. Nate entering the Hyatt last night. Flip. Nate's car parked illegally near Isabel's apartment complex. "I hired a private investigator 6 months ago, Nate. His name is Mr. Thorne. He's very expensive, and luckily, since we have a joint account, you paid for him. Thanks for that." Nate gripped the edge of the card table so hard his knuckles turned white. 6 months? He had been seeing Isabel for 7. She had known almost the entire time. "I didn't leave last night because I was angry," Cassidy said, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. "I left last night because the timing was finally perfect. You see, while you were busy ordering room service and whatever else you were doing, I had a moving crew here, 3 trucks, 12 men. We started at 8:18 p.m. We finished by 2:00 a.m. She paused, taking a sip of coffee from a travel mug. "You might be wondering why the locks didn't work. I had a locksmith here at 3:00 a.m. I changed the tumblers on the front door. I left the back one for you because I wanted you to walk through the empty kitchen. I wanted you to feel the space where I used to be." Nate slammed his fist on the table. "You psychotic." "Don't call me crazy," the video snapped, as if she could hear him. "I'm not crazy. I'm efficient, and I'm thorough. You see those papers? Read page 5, paragraph 3. Nate dropped the tablet and grabbed the divorce papers. He frantically flipped to page 5. Whereas the respondent, Nathaniel Sterling, has engaged in marital misconduct, evidence of which is attached as Exhibit A. He skimmed down. The petitioner, Cassidy Sterling, invokes the moral turpitude clause of the Sterling and O'Connell partnership agreement. Nate froze. The blood drained from his face so fast he nearly fainted. The partnership agreement. When he and Grant started the firm, Cassidy's father had put up the seed money, nearly $2 million. Because of that, her father had insisted on a clause. If Nate were to ever engage in actions that publicly disgraced the family or the firm, including proven adultery, his shares in the company would revert to a trust controlled by Cassidy. "You didn't just lose your wife last night, Nate," the video voice said softly. "You lost your company. Grant signed off on the transfer of shares at 9 Aarhus p.m. last night." Nate stared at the screen. "Grant?" "Oh, yes. Grant knows everything. He has for weeks. He tried to tell you to stop, didn't he? He told you to go home to your wife. But you laughed at him. You told him I was boring and past my prime." "You remember saying that?" Nate slumped into the folding chair, the metal digging into his back. He did remember. He had said it over drinks, thinking he was safe in the locker room. Talk of brotherhood. "Grant is a good man," Cassidy said. "He didn't want to see the firm destroyed by your ego. So he made a deal. He keeps his half. I take yours. You're an employee now, Nate, and I'm your boss." The video ended. The screen went black. Nate sat in the empty room, the silence roaring in his ears. He had no wife, he had no furniture, and apparently he had no company. He grabbed his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it twice before dialing Grant. It rang once. Twice. Then, voicemail. "You've reached Grant O'Connell. If this is a business emergency, please call my assistant. If this is personal, well, leave a message." Nate screamed, a raw, guttural sound of pure rage, and hurled the phone across the room. It smashed into the drywall, leaving a dent, and cracked on the floor. He was alone. But the worst part was the realization that he hadn't just been caught. He had been outplayed. For an hour, Nate just sat there. He stared at the dust bunnies where the sofa used to be. The sun rose higher, casting long, harsh beams of light across the empty floor, illuminating the imperfections in the hardwood he had never noticed before. His stomach growled, a violent reminder that his body was still functioning, even if his life wasn't. He walked to the kitchen, opening the fridge out of habit. It was empty, except for a single bottle of water and a Tupperware container. He grabbed the container. Inside was a slice of their wedding cake, the top tier, which they were supposed to eat on their first anniversary, but had saved in the back of the freezer for sentimental reasons. It was thawed, and there was a bite taken out of it. He slammed the fridge door shut. This was psychological warfare. Cassidy wasn't just leaving, she was haunting him. He needed to get out of the house. He couldn't breathe in here. He needed to find Grant. He needed to fix this. He grabbed his keys and the divorce papers, leaving the tablet and the ring on the table. He stormed out the back door, locking it, then realizing he didn't have the new key for the front door, so he'd be locked out. "Fine," he yelled at the house. "Keep it." He got into his Mercedes. He drove fast, too fast, weaving through the morning commuter traffic of Greenwich. He needed to get to the firm. Sterling and O'Connell was located in a sleek, glass-fronted building downtown. It was his pride and joy. He parked in his reserved spot, reserved for N. Sterling, partner, and marched toward the entrance. The security guard, an older man named Ralph, who Nate usually ignored, stepped in front of the turnstile. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," Ralph said, looking uncomfortable. He didn't meet Nate's eyes. Morning, Ralph. Out of my way, I'm late. I'm sorry, sir. My pass key isn't working for you. Nate stopped. What are you talking about? I own the building. Well, sir, I was given a memo this morning. Your security clearance has been revoked pending a HR review. HR review? Nate laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. I am HR. I am the owner. Let me up, Ralph, or you're fired. I can't do that, Nate. The voice came from the elevator bank. It was Grant O'Connell. Grant looked impeccable in a navy suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like he had slept 8 hours. He looked like a man with a clear conscience. Nate lunged at the turnstile. Grant, what the hell is going on? Cassidy has lost her mind. She emptied the house. She says you signed over my shares. Grant walked up to the barrier, keeping the glass between them. He looked sad, genuinely sad, but there was no pity in his eyes. I didn't have a choice, Nate. The morality clause, it's ironclad. Her lawyer, that shark, Eleanor Vance. Don't say her name. Eleanor Vance sent over the evidence yesterday afternoon, Grant continued, ignoring the outburst. Audio recordings, Nate, from your office. You brought the girl here? To the office? Nate's mouth went dry. He had brought Isabel here once, just once, late at night. I have staff, Nate. I have female interns. We have a reputation. Cassidy threatened to release the audio to the Architects Guild if we didn't execute the clause immediately. We would have lost our license. We would have lost the Kensington contract. Grant sighed, placing a hand on the glass. You became a liability. I had to protect the firm. I'm your best friend, Nate whispered, his anger turning into despair. And she was your wife, Grant replied coldly. You didn't seem to care about loyalty when you were destroying her. Why should I care about mine to you when you put my livelihood at risk? Grant signaled to Ralph. Escort Mr. Sterling off the premises. If he returns, call the police. You can't do this, Nate shouted as Ralph grabbed his arm. I built this place. You built it with her money, Grant shouted back, his composure finally cracking. It was always her money, Nate. You were just the talent, and talent is replaceable. Nate was shoved out the revolving doors onto the sidewalk. Passers-by stared. A woman with a stroller gave him a wide berth. He stood on the pavement, the divorce papers clutched in his hand. He had nowhere to go, no home, no job. His phone buzzed. He picked it up from the pavement where he had dropped it earlier. The screen was shattered, but it still worked. It was a text from Isabel. Izzy, hey baby, last night was amazing. Are we still on for lunch? I found this cute little Italian place. Nate stared at the text. Isabel. She was the cause of this. Or was she? A dark thought entered his mind. Cassidy had said she knew for 6 months. She had pictures. He typed back, we need to talk. Now. He needed answers, and if he was going down, he wasn't going down alone. He got back in his car and peeled out, heading toward the one place he had left, Isabel's apartment. But as he drove, he realized something that made his blood run cold. In the video, Cassidy mentioned the cheap lavender perfume Isabel wore. Nate had never told Cassidy about the perfume. He had never smelled like it around her. He was meticulous about showering. How did Cassidy know exactly what Isabel smelled like? Unless they had met. Isabel's apartment building was a trendy, exposed brick complex in the Arts District, a place Nate always felt cool visiting, like he was 25 again. Usually the drive over was filled with anticipation. Today it was a blur of honking horns and near misses. He didn't bother buzzing up. He waited for a tenant to exit and caught the door before it swung shut, slipping into the lobby like a thief. He took the stairs to the 3rd floor, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He pounded on door 3B. "Isabel, open the door!" He heard shuffling inside, the click of the peephole, and then the deadbolt sliding back. Isabel opened the door. She wasn't wearing the silk robe he liked. She was wearing oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt that said Yale Drama. Her hair was in a messy bun, and she was eating a bowl of cereal. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. "Hey, Nate," she said, chewing. "You're early. I thought we were doing lunch at 1. Nate pushed past her into the apartment. It was small but stylish, mostly because Nate had paid for the furniture. He spun around, his eyes wild. "Cut the act, Izzy. Cassidy knows. She knows everything." Isabel took another spoonful of cereal, leaning against the doorframe. "I know she knows, Nate. She texted me 10 minutes ago to say you were probably on your way over." Nate froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "She texted you?" "Yeah." Isabel walked into the living room and sat on the sofa. She placed the bowl on the coffee table, right next to a very familiar-looking bottle of lavender perfume. "She wanted to make sure you didn't do anything stupid. She said you get aggressive when you're cornered." "You talk to my wife?" Nate whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than the divorce papers. "How long?" Isabel sighed, the sound of a tired actress finishing a long run. "Sit down, Nate. You look like you're going to have a stroke." "I don't want to sit. I want to know why my life is in flames, and you're eating Fruit Loops." "It's granola," she corrected. "And your life is in flames because you lit the match, Nate. We just controlled the burn." She reached for her purse and pulled out a checkbook. She waved it slightly. "Do you remember how we met?" she asked. "The coffee shop," Nate said. "You spilled your latte on my blueprint." "Right. Accidental. Classic meet-cute." Isabel shook her head, a pitying smile on her face. "Nate, I didn't spill that latte. I poured it. I waited for you to come in every Tuesday at 10:08 a.m. for 3 weeks. I knew your order. I knew you sat at the window seat." "Why?" "Because Cassidy hired me." Nate fell back against the wall, his legs giving out. He slid down until he hit the floor. "What?" "I'm an actress, Nate. A struggling one. Or I was. 6 months ago, I was working double shifts as a waitress, drowning in student loans. A woman came into the restaurant. Elegant. Sad eyes. She sat in my section. Isabel picked up the perfume bottle, turning it in the light. She told me her husband was bored, that he was looking for a thrill. She said she'd rather he'd cheat with a professional who followed a script than fall in love with someone real who might actually take him away from her children. "We don't have children," Nate croaked. "I know that now," Isabel said. "But back then..." I believed her. She offered me $50,000 to be your perfect distraction. She gave me a dossier, Nate. Your likes, your dislikes, the fact that you hate red lipstick but love smoky eyes, the fact that you feel important when you explain architecture to someone who pretends to be clueless. Nate felt bile rise in his throat. Every conversation, every intimate moment, every time he felt like a god explaining the curvature of a steel beam to her. It was all coaching. "So, last night?" Nate asked, his voice barely audible. "Cassidy scripted it," Isabel said, ruthlessly. "She told me to keep you out until at least 4 a.m. She booked the hotel room. She even picked out the lingerie. You slept with me for money," Nate said, disgust curling his lip. Isabel's face hardened. "I acted a role, Nate, and you were a terrible scene partner. Do you know how exhausting it is to listen to you complain about Grant for 3 hours? How boring it is to hear you brag about money you didn't earn?" She stood up, towering over him. "But here is the twist you didn't see coming. Halfway through, I started to feel bad for you. I told Cassidy I wanted to stop. I told her you were just a lonely guy. And she showed me the texts you sent Grant about me, Isabel said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The ones where you called me a cheap little thing and said I was good for a few months until something tighter comes along. Nate closed his eyes. He had sent that text. He was showing off. He didn't mean it, or did he? That's when I stopped feeling guilty, Isabel said. That's when I agreed to the finale. The perfume on the collar. She instructed me to do that. The missed calls. Planned. She wanted to destroy you, Nate. And honestly, you made it really easy. Nate scrambled to his feet. He felt dirty, used. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had treated women like objects his whole life, and now he was the object. I'm leaving, he muttered. Good, Isabel said. Oh, and Nate, leave the key to the apartment. I pay the rent, Nate shouted. Not anymore. The lease is in my name. The checks came from a trust, Cassidy's trust. She held out her hand. Key, now. Nate fumbled in his pocket, threw the key on the floor, and stormed out. He ran down the 3 flights of stairs, bursting out into the sunlight. He felt exposed, like the skin had been peeled off his body. Every person walking by seemed to know. There goes the man who was seduced by a script. He needed money. He needed a hotel. He needed to get away from this town, from Cassidy, from Grant, from Isabel. He patted his pocket for his wallet. He had his credit cards. He had his platinum Amex. He was still Nathaniel Sterling. He could still buy his way out of this hell. He walked to the nearest ATM on the corner. He needed cash. A lot of it. He inserted his card, punched in his PIN. Processing. Nate tapped his foot impatiently. Access denied. Please contact your financial institution. What? He tried again. Maybe he mistyped. Access denied. Card retained. The machine whirred and didn't spit the card back out. No, no, no! Nate slapped the screen. Give it back! He grabbed his phone to check his banking app. He opened it. Face ID recognized him. The dashboard loaded. Checking account? Savings account? Investment portfolio? And at the bottom, a new line item he had never seen before. Outstanding liability. Line of credit. $450,000. Nate stared at the negative sign. He wasn't just broke, he was buried. The lobby of the First National Bank of Connecticut was cool and smelled of polished marble and old money. It was the kind of place where people whispered, as if speaking too loudly would depreciate the currency. Nate Sterling didn't whisper. I want to see the manager, he bellowed, slamming his hand on the teller's counter. Someone stole my money. My accounts are empty. The teller, a young woman named Sarah who looked terrified, pressed a silent alarm button under the desk. Sir, please lower your voice. I am Nathaniel Sterling. I have been banking here for 10 years. Where is Henderson? Get me Henderson. Mr. Sterling. The voice came from a glass office to the left. Arthur Henderson, the branch manager, stood in the doorway. He was a small man with round glasses and a nervous disposition, but today he looked grave. Please come into my office, Henderson said. Nate marched in, ignoring the chair offered to him. Arthur, what is going on? The ATM ate my card. My app shows 0, and there's a $500,000 debt I didn't authorize. Henderson sighed, closing the door and pulling the blinds. Sit down, Nate, please. Nate sat, his legs shaking. First of all, Henderson said, adjusting his glasses, the withdrawals are legitimate. They were made this morning, between 9 a.m. and 9:30 a.m., via wire transfer to an offshore holding company. I didn't authorize that. You didn't have to, Henderson said gently. It was a joint account, Nate. Cassidy has full signatory power. She came in person. She had all the documentation. She can't just take everything. It's community property until a judge says otherwise. And since she moved it to an offshore trust in the Cayman Islands, well, good luck getting a judge here to touch it. Nate put his head in his hands. Okay, I can fight that in court. But the debt, the negative $400,000, I never took out a loan. Henderson pulled a file from his desk. He opened it and spun it around to face Nate. Do you recognize this signature? Nate looked at the document. It was a loan agreement for a business venture called Sterling Heights, LLC. The signature at the bottom was his. It was unmistakable. The loop of the N, the sharp slash of the T. That's my signature, Nate said, confused. But I don't remember this document. It's dated 3 months ago, Henderson explained. You came in with Cassidy. You were in a rush. You said you were late for a golf game with Grant. Cassidy had a stack of papers for the refinancing of the house, and this was in the middle. The memory hit Nate like a physical blow. 3 months ago, a Tuesday. He was rushing to golf. Cassidy had caught him at breakfast, flustered, saying the bank needed signatures for the lower interest rate on the mortgage. She had a stack of papers, flagged with "Sign Here" stickers. He hadn't read them. He never read them. Cassidy handled the household finances. She was a CPA before they married. He trusted her to handle the boring stuff, so he could be the genius architect. What is this loan for? Nate asked, dread pooling in his stomach. It's a high-interest, short-term liquidity loan, Henderson said, collateralized against your personal future earnings and your 401k. And where is the money? It was spent, Henderson said, by Sterling Heights, LLC. Spent on what? Henderson turned the page. Consulting fees, interior design retainers, and private investigation services. Nate stared at the ledger. Cassidy had tricked him into taking out a loan in his own name against his own retirement to pay for the investigator who caught him, the redecorating of the house, which was actually the moving trucks, and probably Isabel's payoff. He had financed his own destruction. She used my credit to pay for her revenge, Nate whispered. Technically, Henderson said, trying to sound sympathetic but failing. She used a legal entity you co-signed for to pay vendors. It's perfectly legal. Evil, perhaps. But legal. I'm ruined, Nate said. Arthur, I have nothing. I have no job. I have no house. I have no cash. It gets worse, Nate. Nate looked up. How? How could it possibly get worse? Because the loan is in default as of this morning. The terms stated that if your employment status at Sterling and O'Connell changed, which, according to a notification we received from Mr. O'Connell an hour ago, it has, the full amount is due immediately. Henderson slid a piece of paper across the desk. We have to freeze your personal assets to cover the interest. That includes your car. My car? The Mercedes is leased through the bank, Nate. Since you can't make the payment... There was a knock on the glass door. A uniformed police officer and a man in a tow truck jumpsuit were standing there. Mr. Sterling, the officer said, stepping into the room. I'm afraid I need your keys. Nate looked at the keys on the desk. The Mercedes fob with the leather strap Cassidy had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. The fight had been drained out of him. He picked up the keys and dropped them into the officer's hand. Is there anything else? Nate asked, his voice hollow. Do you want my shoes? My jacket? No, sir, the officer said. But you can't loiter here. You need to move along. Nate walked out of the bank. He walked past the empty spot where his car had been. He walked onto the sidewalk. It was noon. The sun was high and bright, mocking the darkness of his reality. He began to walk. He didn't know where. He just walked. He walked until the soles of his Italian leather loafers began to blister his feet. He walked until the suburban sprawl of Greenwich gave way to the grittier, industrial edge of the city. He found himself standing in front of a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor. It was the kind of place Nate Sterling would never be caught dead in. Sticky floors, neon signs with burnt-out letters, patrons who looked like they had lived 10 lifetimes of bad luck. He checked his pocket. He had a crumpled $20 bill he had found in his jacket pocket. Emergency valet money. He walked in. The air smelled of stale beer and regret. Perfect. He sat at the bar. "Whiskey," he told the bartender, a burly man with a scar over his eye. "The cheapest you have. Leave the bottle." He drank. He drank to forget the empty house. He drank to forget the video. He drank to forget Isabel's bored face and Grant's cold betrayal. As the amber liquid burned his throat, his phone buzzed. It was the only thing he had left. He looked at the screen. A notification from Instagram. Cassidy Hart just posted a photo. His thumb hovered over the notification. He shouldn't look. He knew he shouldn't look. He tapped it. The photo was taken from the deck of a boat. The water was turquoise. The Cayman Islands, maybe. Cassidy was wearing a white sun hat and holding a glass of champagne. She looked radiant, younger, free. And next to her, with his arm draped casually over her shoulder, smiling a smile Nate hadn't seen in years. Nate squinted at the screen, bringing it closer to his drunken eyes. It was a man Nate knew. It wasn't Grant. It wasn't a stranger. It was his brother, Liam. The caption read, "Finally free, and with the one who waited. New beginnings. Truth wins." Nate dropped the phone into his whiskey glass. Liam, his younger brother. The failure of the family. The artist whom Nate had mocked for years for not having a real job. Liam, who Cassidy had always been sweet to. Liam had been waiting. Nate let out a laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a cackle, loud and unhinged. The other patrons turned to stare at the man in the ruined expensive suit, laughing at his drowning phone. He wasn't just outplayed. He was the villain in a story he hadn't even bothered to read. But as the alcohol hit his bloodstream and the rage began to curdle into something colder, something more dangerous, Nate Sterling stopped laughing. He fished his phone out of the whiskey. It was waterproof. It flickered, but the screen stayed on. He looked at the photo of his brother and his wife. "Game isn't over yet," he whispered to the screen. He had nothing to lose, and a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man on earth. He stood up, swaying slightly. He needed a plan. He needed an ally, and he knew exactly who the only other person in this town was who hated Cassidy Hart as much as he did right now. Or rather, someone who hated being used by Cassidy Hart. He was going back to the apartment. He was going back to Isabel. Not for romance, not for forgiveness, for revenge. The walk back to Isabel's apartment was the longest of Nate's life. He wasn't running on adrenaline anymore. He was running on hate. Pure, distilled, high-octane hate. When he banged on door 3B this time, there was no hesitation. Isabel opened it, still in her sweatpants, but this time she held a glass of wine. She looked at Nate, disheveled, smelling of cheap whiskey, eyes burning, and she didn't roll her eyes. She looked intrigued. "You look like a man who just found out the ending of the movie," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Nate walked in and went straight to the bottle of wine on the counter. He poured himself a glass without asking. "It's Liam," Nate said, his voice grating. "My brother. He's the one with Cassidy." Isabel froze. The glass stopped halfway to her lips. For the first time, The mask of the bored actress slipped, revealing genuine shock. "The brother?" she whispered. The artist guy? The one with the debt?" Nate's head snapped up. "What did you say?" Isabel blinked, realizing she had slipped. She walked over to the couch and sat down, tucking her legs under her. "Cassidy. She complained about him. During our briefings. She said your brother was always asking for money. She said he had commitments to dangerous people." She made it sound like she pitied him. Nate paced the small room, his mind racing. Liam had always been the black sheep. Failed galleries, bad investments, sketchy friends. Nate had bailed him out 12 times. But dangerous people? "Isabel," Nate said, crouching in front of her. "Think. Did Cassidy ever mention how much he owed?" "She mentioned a figure once," Isabel said, furrowing her brow. "She was on the phone with him while I was in the bathroom. She thought I couldn't hear. She said, 3 million is impossible to hide, Liam. We have to do this the hard way." The pieces slammed into place. The 3 million wasn't for a new venture. It wasn't for love. "The hostile takeover," Nate whispered. "The morality clause. The offshore trust. It wasn't just about punishing me. It was a heist." He stood up, his energy returning. "Liam is in deep with loan sharks. He needed access to the family trust, but he couldn't get it because my father's will locked him out. I was the executor. As long as I was in the picture, Liam got a monthly allowance, nothing more. But if you were disgraced..." Isabel trailed off, her eyes widening. "If I'm removed for moral turpitude, control of the trust reverts to the next of kin, or their spouse, if deemed competent by the board. Cassidy takes control. She empties the accounts to pay off Liam's debts, and they run off into the sunset." Nate laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "She thinks it's a romance. She thinks he waited for her. But he's just using her to save his own skin." Isabel took a sip of wine. "So? What do you care? She ruined you. Let him ruin her. It's poetic justice." "No," Nate said, his jaw tightening. "Because that's my money. That's my firm. And I'll be damned if I let my brother steal my life and stick me with the bill." He looked at Isabel. "You said you're an actress, right? A good one." "I fooled you for 6 months," she said dryly. "I have a role for you," Nate said. "It pays better than Cassidy did. But there is no script. We have to improvise." "With what money, Nate? Your card was declined." Nate reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his heavy platinum watch, a Patek Philippe. It was worth $40,000 easily. He tossed it onto her lap. "Pawn it. That's your retainer. We need recording equipment. We need a burner phone. And we need to get you into the Sterling and O'Connell launch party tomorrow night." Isabel picked up the watch, weighing it in her hand. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "I never liked Cassidy anyway," she said. "She tipped terrible." The grand ballroom of the Hyatt Regency smelled of expensive lilies, truffles, and even more expensive desperation. It was a space Nate knew intimately. He had sketched the vaulted ceilings on a napkin 5 years ago, arguing with the contractors about the acoustics. Now he was sneaking through the service corridors of his own creation, wearing a polyester waiter's vest that was 2 sizes too tight and smelled faintly of bleach. The theme of the gala was masquerade. Cassidy loved themes. She loved the idea that you could put on a mask and become someone else. Tonight, everyone was hiding something. The investors were hiding their doubts. Grant was hiding his guilt. Cassidy was hiding her treachery. And Nate was hiding a wire cutter and a burner phone. He adjusted the earpiece, hidden beneath his dark hair. From his vantage point in the shadows of the mezzanine balcony, The crowd below looked like a sea of shimmering beetles. "I'm in position," Isabel's voice crackled in his ear. "And wow, Nate, you really bought that dress for Cassidy. It's tacky." Nate looked down. Isabel was gliding through the crowd like a shark in crimson silk. In a room full of black tuxedos and silver gowns, she was a drop of blood in a glass of milk. She was wearing a hidden microphone, taped securely to her collarbone beneath the dress strap. "Focus, Izzy," Nate whispered, his eyes scanning the VIP section. "Target is at the bar. He's on his third scotch." Liam Sterling stood near the ice sculpture, looking less like a partner and more like a man waiting for a firing squad. He was sweating, despite the aggressive air conditioning. He kept checking his phone, his leg bouncing nervously. "I see him," Isabel murmured. "Showtime." Nate watched as Isabel adopted a new persona. She wasn't the bored mistress or the struggling actress. She was bubbly, slightly intoxicated, and dangerously loud. She collided with Liam, sending a splash of amber liquid onto his velvet lapel. "Oh my God!" she shrieked, grabbing a cocktail napkin and aggressively dabbing at his chest. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry." "Get off!" Liam snapped, shoving her hand away. He looked around wildly to see if anyone had noticed the stain. "Watch where you're going!" Isabel gasped, pulling back and squinting at him through the eye holes of her feathered mask. "Wait, Liam? Liam Sterling? Is that you?" Liam froze. "Do I know you?" "It's me, Candy!" Isabel shouted, loud enough that a nearby couple turned to stare. "From the Sapphire Club in Atlantic City, remember? The bachelor party with the donkey?" Liam's face drained of color. He grabbed Isabel's upper arm, his grip bruising, and dragged her toward a secluded alcove near the kitchen service doors. The shadows swallowed them, but Nate could hear every heavy breath through the earpiece. "Keep your voice down, you idiot," Liam hissed. "What are you doing here?" "I'm working the party," Isabel improvised, her voice dropping the bimbo act just a fraction. "But wow, look at you. Tuxedo. Champagne. I guess you finally got the money to pay Vinny back, huh?" "He was looking for you last week, Liam. He stopped by the club. He had a tire iron. He seemed very emotional." Nate held his breath in the darkness of the balcony. Vinny. The name of the lone shark was the key. "I have the money," Liam whispered, his voice shaking with a terrifying mixture of fear and arrogance. "Tonight. It's happening tonight." "Is it?" Isabel pressed. "Because Vinny said you were out of time. He said if he didn't see 5 million by midnight, he was going to start mailing pieces of you to your mother." "Tell him to back off," Liam snapped. "The merger is announced at 9 p.m. Once the ink dries on the digital contract, I get access to the Sterling Trust. I'm bypassing the corporate account and wiring it directly to Vinny's shell company. 5 million? Isabel let out a low whistle. "Does your new partner know? Does Cassidy know her art gallery in Paris is actually a payoff to a mobster?" Liam laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound that echoed in Nate's ear. "Cassidy, please. Cassidy is a useful idiot. She thinks this is a romance. She thinks we're soulmates. She's just the key to the vault. Once the wire hits, I'm gone. I've got a flight to Brazil booked for 2 and 8 a.m. She can deal with the fallout. She can deal with the bankruptcy." "You're cold, Liam," Isabel said. "I'm a survivor. Now get lost." "Got him," Nate whispered. "Get out of there, Izzy. Now." As Isabel slipped away, Nate moved toward the AV booth. This was the moment. The speeches were starting. The booth was locked, but Nate had designed the locking mechanism. A swift kick to the lower panel loosened the strike plate, and he slipped inside. The sound technician, a 20-something kid with headphones around his neck, jumped up. "Hey, restricted area. "Sit down, Kevin," Nate said, recognizing him. "I'm doing a sound check." Before the kid could protest, Nate shoved a heavy flight case against the door, barricading them in. He pulled out his phone, connected it to the master mixing console via the auxiliary input, and overrode the faders. On the stage below, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the podium. Grant O'Connell stepped up, looking every inch the traitorous statesman. "Ladies and gentlemen," Grant boomed, his voice smooth as oil. "Tonight is about evolution. It is about shedding the dead weight of the past to build a brighter future. I am proud to introduce the new heart of this firm, Cassidy Hart." Applause rippled through the room. Cassidy walked out. She looked radiant, triumphant. She took the microphone. "Thank you, Grant. This company was built on a foundation of trust, but trust must be earned. And tonight, we begin a new chapter of total transparency." Nate's finger hovered over the play button on his phone screen. "Transparency," he muttered. "You got it, Cass." He hit the button. A high-pitched screech of feedback tore through the room, causing 300 people to cover their ears. Then, the ballroom went silent. And then, a voice, amplified to godlike proportions, boomed from the speakers. "Cassidy, please. Cassidy is a useful idiot." The color vanished from Cassidy's face. She looked around, confused, thinking it was a prank. She thinks this is a romance. She thinks we're soulmates. She's just the key to the vault. The crowd gasped. A collective murmur of shock rose like a wave. Grant signaled frantically to the sound booth, drawing a finger across his throat. Nate just smiled and turned the volume up. "Once the wire hits, I'm gone. She can deal with the fallout. She can deal with the bankruptcy." On stage, Cassidy turned slowly to look at Liam. He was standing near the stairs, looking like he wanted to vomit. "Liam?" Cassidy whispered, her voice picked up by the live mic she was still holding. "What is that?" The recording delivered the final blow. "Tell Vinny I have the money. 5 million. Interest is a bitch." Nate stepped out onto the balcony, ripping the mask from his face. He grabbed a hanging spotlight and swung it manually, blinding the people on stage. "Good evening, everyone," Nate shouted. His voice didn't need a microphone. It carried on the acoustics he had perfected. "Nate!" Grant yelled, shielding his eyes. "Security! Get him!" "Too late, Grant," Nate called down, leaning over the railing like a judge from on high. "The police are already at the loading dock. Turns out, conspiracy to defraud, a trust, and embezzlement are felonies. Who knew?" He looked at Cassidy. She was trembling, staring up at him with eyes that were black holes of shock. "He never loved you, Cass." Nate's voice cracked slightly, the only sign of his own pain. "He didn't wait for you. He waited for your signature." On stage, panic took over. Liam realized his window was closing. He didn't run for the exit, he ran for Cassidy. Specifically, he ran for the tablet she was clutching, the one with the biometric authentication for the bank transfer. "Give me the codes," Liam screamed, his facade of the tortured artist shattering completely. He lunged at her, grabbing her wrist. "No!" Cassidy shrieked, pulling back. "You used me. Give it to me." Liam punched her. It wasn't a slap. It was a closed-fist punch to the shoulder that sent her sprawling across the stage. Her dress tore audibly. The crowd screamed. It was chaos. The sophisticated veneer of Greenwich society dissolved into a brawl. Grant tackled Liam, and the two men rolled across the stage, knocking over the podium and smashing the New Horizons sign. Flashbulbs popped. Phones recorded. The ruin was being live-streamed to the world. Nate watched for 10 seconds. He saw his brother being subdued by security. He saw his ex-wife weeping on the floor, surrounded by the debris of her own ambition. He felt light. Empty. But light. He turned and walked away. He took the fire stairs down, skipping steps, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion. He pushed open the heavy steel doors to the side alley. The cool night air hit him. Isabel was leaning against a dumpster, smoking a cigarette she had bummed from a valet. She was holding her high heels in one hand and Nate's Patek Philippe watch in the other. "You didn't pawn it?" Nate asked, surprised. "I stole a purse from the cloakroom instead," she shrugged, tossing him the watch. "Old habits die hard. Plus it looked good on you." Nate caught the watch. He strapped it back on. It felt heavy, a reminder of the life he used to have. But as he looked at the flashing blue lights of the police cruisers swarm the front entrance, he realized he didn't want that life back. "Did we win?" Isabel asked, dropping the cigarette and crushing it with her bare foot. Nate listened to the distant shouting from inside the hotel. "They lost," Nate said quietly. "That's not the same as winning." He offered his arm to her. "Where to now?" Isabel asked. "You're homeless, remember?" "I know a place," Nate said. "There's a 24-hour diner on Route 1. The owner owes me a favor for designing his patio. The coffee is terrible, but the booth seats are comfortable." "I could go for terrible coffee," Isabel smiled, linking her arm through his. They walked away from the Hyatt, away from the sirens, and away from the wreckage of the Sterling family name. Nate Sterling had lost his fortune, his wife, and his firm in 48 hours. But as he walked into the darkness, for the first time in years, he wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was finally looking ahead. And that is how the house of cards finally collapsed. Nate Sterling lost his fortune, but he regained his freedom. Cassidy Hart thought she was the player, but she was just another pawn in a con man's game. In the end, cheating isn't just about sleeping with someone else. It's about the lies we tell ourselves to justify the life we're living. What do you think? Did Nate deserve his revenge, or were they all just as toxic as each other? If you enjoyed this roller coaster of betrayal and karma, destroy that like button and subscribe for more stories where the truth always comes out. Let me know in the comments, would you have saved Cassidy at the end? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.